Welcome to Fundraising Unfiltered, my love letter to nonprofit leaders who are done with sugar-coated advice and tired tactics that just don't work anymore. Hi, I'm Danielle Locke, your nonprofit success partner. I've raised tens of millions for organizations of all sizes, and now I help leaders like you fund your mission with confidence. We'll talk fundraising, staff drama, board issues, budget cuts, and even bullet holes. Yep, bullet holes. Because we've got real stories and smart solutions and a bunch of laugh out loud moments. All right, let's go. Welcome back to Fundraising Unfiltered, the podcast where we put the fun in fundraising, even when nonprofit life feels anything but fun. Today, we're talking about something nonprofit leaders almost never talk about out loud: burnout, exhaustion, and the emotional toll of caring so much about the work that we do. If you're in this sector, you're probably used to pouring your energy into everyone else, your staff, donors, board, clients, and community. Somewhere along the way, your own well-being gets pushed to the bottom of that list. Today's conversation is about self-care, self-love, and protecting your energy as a leader, not as a luxury, but as something that actually makes you a better leader. Our guest today is Lori Spivey, founder of Energgirl LLC, who helps people reconnect with their energy, reduce stress, and create healthier lives through holistic wellness practices. Lori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I actually had sustained a traumatic brain injury a number of years ago, and Western medicine was not able to sort of fix that frontal lobe processing, if you will. I was on a cocktail of medications and seeing therapists and psychologists and neurologists and all kinds of doctors. And after about 1.5 years, they said, if you've not recovered to this point, you're just not going to recover. And so I was fortunate enough to have a coworker at the time who was utilizing an energy practitioner. And she said, would you be interested? All I could think of was, well, I have nothing to lose, right? And so I went to this energy practitioner, and after 2 visits, my brain function had started to return. Oh my goodness, in the world is this? And how can I learn more? And so I just started embracing everything that was holistic, energetic, and really trying to understand the science behind it and then incorporate as much of it into my life to overcome all of these things that I've been healing from. So that was how I first discovered it.
For what period of time? How long did that take you?
So I also had a lot of physical afflictions from the accident itself. So I would say start to finish, it was about 2 years for me to fully feel like I was pre-accident. And then I started to experience different types of energy work. So Qigong and pranic healing and horse divination and just all kinds of different things. I wanted to explore to see what felt right to me and what felt like home and nurtured me. And I landed on Reiki and then reflexology. I was doing a lot of meditation during this time as well. And then eventually came across somebody who was an Akashic record reader. And I thought, oh, that's a really good thing to add to this practice because it will help me to serve women with mind, body, and spirit. And it's a more whole, outlook on somebody's own wellness journey. So that's how I came to it.
The energy is sort of the big umbrella, right? And you mentioned a couple of different methodologies, but for those of us that aren't as educated, right, a little less woo-woo, talk to me about energy work. What is it? What does it do? And how do some of these practices differ?
So energy itself, our body's made up of energy. And I always explain to my clients when they first come for a session, our body functions much like an electrical circuitry panel, right? If there's an interruption to that flow of electricity, then you don't have output to have energy at a socket or a light or whatever the case may be. So in our bodies, it functions much the same way. So if you've had an injury or surgery or illness, it can impede the body's ability for energy to flow optimally to actually nourish your organs and your blood flow and your oxygen levels and all of those things. And so it's important to have, a good energy balance within your body. And I'll say this also, as women, we tend to put everybody before us energetically, intellectually, everything, right? In all capacities of our life. And so the flow of energy that comes into us, oftentimes we give away more energy than we're actually receiving in. And so it depletes us of our energy. And so I always like the airlines when they come on before a flight and they say, if the oxygen mask drops, put it on yourself first. And I feel like many times we start out our days in a deficit. We don't give ourselves the oxygen or the nourishment that we need ourselves in order to sustain what we need to be able to sustain in a day's time to give all the things we need to give. So if we're not taking care of ourselves first and foremost, how can we possibly give to those that we love? You can't have an oxygen tank that's at 50% and expect it to output at 100%.
How does that manifest, right? What does that look like for a nonprofit leader, someone that's giving? What are some of the signs? What are they seeing? Or maybe they're the last one to notice it, right? What are other people noticing that they should be cued into?
Yes. I think first and foremost, if your sleep pattern is not good, if you're not getting the rest that you need every night because you're consumed mentally, you've got all this fatigue mentally and you can't sleep, or if your body's exhausted and you can't relax your muscles into being able to relax and sleep, it can show up in a variety of ways. It can show up in mood swings. It can show up in headaches. It can show up in autoimmune issues. There are so many autoimmune issues that are tied to energetic blockages in the human body. And so I feel as though we go like the Energizer Bunny until all of a sudden there's nothing left to help us to go, right? And so we oftentimes don't realize how depleted we are until we hit a wall. And so optimally, you want to be able to nurture yourself as you go so that you always have that full tank or full-ish tank to be able to do all the things you want to do and do them well. Because when we're splitting ourselves and trying to give to our nonprofit world, our family, our friends, there's so much happening in the world that it really does deplete us.
I certainly can relate to that. That's why I'm a consultant and not in nonprofit, but I can tell you that that is the story of probably 90% of the nonprofit executive directors that I work with. They live, eat, sleep, breathe the mission. They're doing all the things all the time, completely exhausted, missing family functions, evenings, weekends, always solving problems, always putting out the fire, always putting themselves last. And I have a very good friend who's a CEO, and she will hit a wall probably 2 to 3 times a year. She'll just go and go, doesn't eat, loses a bunch of weight, is just exhausted, will hit a wall, and literally will either end up in the hospital or just flat out in bed. Her body will force her to slow down for 3, 4, or 5 days. And I've mentioned this to her, right? I've tried to encourage her. So if you're looking at someone like that who is everything to the organization and they're giving, if they have just 10 minutes a day, right? What is the thing that they can do to start? What is the first, second, third small steps that they can take to start on this path?
Yes. Such an important question. I have a program that I teach myself, and I always say the mind is the gateway to your overall wellness, right? You have to have a mind that's open enough to trying different things. So even if you are a neurodivergent person, if you have a lot of anxiety or ADHD or whatever the case may be, and you have a difficult time singularly focusing, meditation is something that you feel is out of reach. And I can tell you it's not. And I always start with a very simple meditation. It's 5 minutes in duration, and it teaches you how to breathe. And when you start to really focus on that breath in and how it's filling your lungs and how it's expanding that space and allowing your body to really get the oxygen it needs, you start to feel your whole central nervous system relax and go into alignment. And so that's where I like to start with anybody who feels that they can't embrace a meditation. I have one client who very much anxiety ridden, ADHD, all the things. And I started her on this 5-minute meditation program. And now, a year later, she cannot go through her day without a 45-minute meditation. And she is able to singularly focus, and she is able to have singular thoughts, and she's not trying to do more than she knows she can do. And so that's where I really see the benefit, is starting with that one simple step.
So in business terms, right, what's the ROI on this, right? So what's the risk to their organization? And then what's the benefit if they start to really take action down this path?
The risk for them is that they're not going to be well, right? So if you don't take care of your wellness, you're going to be forced to take care of your illness. And nobody wants that. You don't want to get stopped dead in your tracks and then have this gap that you're trying to fill in your organization and have somebody that is not as good or as familiar with what you're trying to accomplish to step in for you. And so small steps, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, anything you can do to help nurture yourself in your overall wellness and keeping your body in a state of feeling safe and comfortable. Because when we start to go out of control in our thoughts, right, or our actions, then our body goes into that fight or flight, produces adrenaline, and those adrenal glands will continue to produce until we've dealt with whatever's going on. And to try to help calm that system down, going into your mind and calming that central nervous system is a great way to do it.
We haven't really talked about it, but certainly the reason that I want to talk about this is because the nonprofit industry, the nonprofit culture glorifies exhaustion. I think our culture in general, you ask somebody how they are and they're like busy. And I'm personally guilty of that myself. But there's just this point of exhaustion is the norm and burnout is acceptable. What if you had one thing that you could directly say to these nonprofit leaders who are exhausted but feel guilty about slowing down? What would you say to them?
That's such a deep question. So, first of all and foremost, I would say, taking your health for granted is not going to serve you well. And if you find that a sign of exhaustion is equal to success, that is not ever going to be sustainable for anyone, right? I actually have worked with two CEOs of very large nonprofits downtown Cleveland, and they both come to me because they know they need to carve out time to be able to nurture their body, their mind, their everything, right? It's so important to take a step back. If you have a child and you see that the child's exhausted, what are you going to do for that child, right? To provide a safe space for them to feel that they can rest and do what they need to do to recover. If we have a sick person in our family, we're giving them chicken soup or taking them to the doctor or, whatever the case may be, we are nurturing their ability to get well. But yet we feel it's okay for ourselves to keep going and going and going until we literally wind up so depleted we're hospitalized or we're, in bed for several days. I relate to that. I used to be in a corporate job and I used to go that way. And so I know your body's going to give up on you at some point. And you don't want it to do that. And honestly, you want to show up for everybody as good as you can every day. And so if you can't take time for yourself to nurture yourself, how are you going to show up for everybody else?
Amen. Absolutely. And I think this is such an important message. We know that executive directors are turning over, people are retiring, and it's so much, right? And I can empathize with nonprofit leaders who are doing all the things to make their organizations work at the detriment of themselves and their family. And certainly that, as the leader of the organization, that feeds into the culture of your organization and your staff health. The message I want to get across is that this is doable, that this is important. It's doable. Start with 5-minute meditation. But what would the path look like? How would you suggest, okay, we get them to do the 5-minute meditation. That's helping a little bit. What are the next things that they might look into doing? What are the other modalities, or how do they explore the next steps that still fits into what their day-to-day lives?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to just say this because many times I find that people that are working in the nonprofit sector feel that if they take time away to get their nails done or their hair done or whatever, that is their time, right? No, that's not their time. That's basic maintenance that you're taking care of, right? What's happening to your soul? What's happening inside your body? And as much as I say that, the meditation is key and your mind is the gateway, that is the beginning. That's the start of. And I truly believe that once a person can embrace that 5-minute meditation and start to feel the impact of that, whenever they're in a stressful situation, they can go into that breathing mode for, a couple of breaths and it resets their central nervous system. I used to do that frequently in corporate America, right? When somebody was getting out of control, I'd be like, okay, that's their stuff, right? But I need to calm myself down. And I would just go into that breathing, which nobody can tell you're doing it, right? So there's a lot of little tools like that I have available, and I'm offering your nonprofit sector a free 30-minute session with me. Book it. Let's talk about what you specifically are coping with in your journey. And then I can offer different tools, right? There's tapping tools that can help bring you back into your body. There are other things that we can talk about that might be nurturing to what you're going through. So it's a very specific sort of journey, and everybody has different tools and tips that help them. And so I like to offer a variety of things. And once I know better how you process information and you like to nurture yourself, if it's a bubble bath, great. I can give you some things to do while you're soaking in the tub that will nurture your central nervous system, as well as sort of that energy that needs to be opened up to flow.
We haven't really talked about it, but I think it's also important. We talk about this giving of energy and the doing all the things, and there's this need to say no to things and protect your energy. Can you talk a little bit about, if you're working with a client, how you help them to resolve the guilt around saying no and protecting their energy? Because I hear that a lot from the executive directors that I work with. Everyone wants them to be at the table. Everyone wants their opinion. Everyone wants them to sit on the community council or in this special meeting and give their opinion, and they just don't feel like they can say no.
The biggest thing with that, no, period, full stop, sentence, is that oftentimes when we don't say no, we resent the fact that we have agreed to something, to the extent that we start to feel it in our bodies and we start to feel ill almost, right? Because we don't want to be there. We don't have time to be there. We're missing our child's soccer game or music recital or dinner with your partner or whatever the case may be. And so we get angry, right? And so the things that we agreed to do out of the goodness of our heart turns our hearts hard because we regret the fact that we've said yes because we really don't have time. And this is going to send your body into this perpetual state of like fight or flight. And it's just dysregulated and it's not going to feel good. And over time, it festers to the point where you actually get ill.
That speaks volumes. It's 100% true. So on the flip side of that, as we sort of wrap up, what does it look like to have someone who has done this journey? What does, on the other side of it, what could it look like for the leader who's listening right now, who is exhausted, who's very doubtful, thinks that, we are just a bunch of hooey and that this is not going to work for them. They don't even have time to be listening to this podcast. But what could it look like for them? What could this look like and how could they get there? And what could their day-to-day life look like?
Once you're able to connect your mind to your body and start understanding where those emotions lie in your body, you can start filtering what you allow in, right? And once you start filtering that and allowing only what you truly want in is where you start to feel better and you start to feel nourished. And whether that's a constant meditative practice, or if you do meditation a couple days a week, you throw in a yoga class, maybe a Reiki class every couple months, whatever the case may be, it's going to look different for everybody because everybody sort of has to process and experience it the way that nourishes their own body. But what I honestly find is there's a light bulb that goes on at some point and people are like, now I feel what you're explaining to me, right? And now I can understand that what I'm taking into my mind is affecting my whole body. So once you learn to filter that, and it's not, I don't want to say like it's, a couple classes of, meditation and you're going to be fine. It is a practice. And it's a practice like medicine's a practice, right? You're constantly searching for what works for that particular person.
Thank you. This has been incredible. Any closing thoughts or advice that you want to share with this particular incredible group of people?
I would honestly encourage everyone to not wait to book a complimentary appointment with me. I personally held so much in my body for so many years that I became very, very ill. And it took a long time for me to understand that I was really, making myself sick. And when I was putting everybody else in front of me and leaving crumbs for myself, it didn't serve me or anybody else well. My adult children now can tell you that their child was a much different relationship than it is now because I have changed. And I have changed because I now take time for myself and I nurture myself so that I can nurture everybody else around me.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you here. This is, to me, a really important message to get out to all of the nonprofit leaders out there that are just live, eat, sleep, breathing their mission and giving everything to everyone and doing amazing things. I mean, I am in awe of you, but we want to also make sure that you are taking care of yourself. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with a nonprofit friend who probably also needs to hear it. And for more practical fundraising tips and resources, check me out at lockstep.com, LOCKESTEP.com, and make sure that you go to Energgirl LLC. Check out Lori. The show notes will have a link to her information, her contact information. And thanks again for listening to the podcast, Fundraising Unfiltered. See you next time.